Much better.
Oh, yeah. You gotta get swifty. You gotta get swifty in here. It's time to get swifty.
This video is brought to you by CyberGameway, with an emphasis on exposing streamers of all types, as well as exploring business relationships with partnered websites and service providers. CyberGameway is the place you want to be for streaming gamers who want that sub bump. To apply for membership or sponsorship, head over to cybergameway.com.
What's up, everyone? I'm Hobbs. You're watching HMODS. Thanks for tuning back in after a really long hiatus. There's been so much stuff going on in my life, not the least of which is wedding planning and getting things under control financially for that kind of thing. What you can't see in front of you is called the Wraith. This is actually supposed to be my first project with CyberGameway.com, and I started it in August of 2019. It is currently September of 2020. And this is, yeah, this has taken longer than the Post Malone build. So what this was supposed to be was, let me back up. There was a Kickstarter a couple of years ago from a guy by the name of Simon Temple. He's an artist and does a lot of ointment creation and stuff. There's another guy by the name of Anish Kapoor, who also is an artist and does a lot of pigments and pigments, not ointments. He does a lot of work with creating pigments and stuff. A couple years ago, Anish Kapoor created a pigment that was really black. But since he wouldn't release the patent, Simon Temple did that as well. Matter of fact, he took what Anish Kapoor supposedly did, because again, didn't release the patent, but he took what Anish Kapoor did and made it better. So what you're not seeing right now is a black that is so black it absorbs 98% of the light shown on it. Even with all this light going on right here, it's still kind of difficult to make out definition in it, because I'm looking right at this and there's no definition going on with the window or anything like that. The only definition you can see is the stuff that I added to it later, and you'll see that. But with this supposed to be sort of the birth cry of HMODS, I wanted to get it done, and then stuff happened. I ran out of money pretty much right away. This is before I got any sponsors. So it sat for about a year until I got a client who approached me and said that he wanted a budget gaming PC. I didn't have any parts that I liked for this thing last year, but getting the green light on this thing really gave me some motivation to get on that. So we set a budget, I made up a parts list, and off I went. But, well, I didn't want to do it like I did it last year. As you can see, the footage that I shot last year was very bitwit. I don't like I didn't have Danielle backing me up on camera. I didn't have proper sound equipment, and also I didn't have a gimbal, so you're seeing a lot of jitteriness like what Kyle does. Not that Kyle is bad at what he does, but I wanted a little bit more production quality. So we're not going to be using any of that. So what we're going to do is, since the case is already done and I don't want to reveal it right now, I did do a proper build blog on it, but what we're going to do is, since it's been 2 years since The Verge came out with its, contribution to the computer building community, what we're going to do is do a build tutorial, because there's a few out there, but if you're watching my channel, maybe you're not watching some of the other ones. And so this is just a good how-to video, and I've actually been asked about this. So this will just be a good how-to video of not to build a computer like The Verge. And so yeah, without further ado, let's get back to the workshop, and I'll show you how to do this.
EKSA introduces their new AirJoy Pro headphones. Weighing in at only 160 grams, the AirJoy Pro offers enthusiast-grade 7.1 digital surround sound while providing maximum comfort at a fraction of the cost of a major brand name series. For more information, visit eksa.net.
I really wish that this would have been my first computer, because I really wanted it to be, hitting the ground running right off the. So, but I am happy that I can finally finish it. I'm glad that the client really liked the chassis, because then I can really, really go to town on this thing. So seeing as how I don't have to do anything with the chassis, basically all I'm just going to do is make a build vlog out of it. Because if for no other reason than the fact that it's been 2 years since the Verge build vlog came out, we might as well do something cool, and we might as well do something right while making fun of them. So for that, I will need my anti-static bracelet. I will need my tweezers. And we will need a pocket knife, which hopefully has a Phillips head screwdriver, and it doesn't. Motherboard. For those of you who don't know, the motherboard is basically, if we're using body analogies, and I've made a video about this before. If we're using a body analogy, the motherboard is your central nervous system. It basically carries all the messages everywhere and operates everything that's basically taking messages from the CPU to every other part of the computer and getting shit done. This one is an older ROG Strix motherboard. It's got all the bells and whistles and stuff, and we're good. Being a H motherboard, it is a Intel motherboard, so I've got this Intel i5 6500, which we will promptly place into the socket. That is what it's called. We're not going to be using the stupid little mounting bracket. There we go. With Intel, it's easy because you've got this tiny little arrow which just goes to the bottom left. And if you notice, if you look at the motherboard, there's a tiny little dot on this thing, and that's a good indicator. The easiest way to remember is Intel. If you're putting the CPU in, Intel is, you can read it regularly. AMD has this thing where you actually have to turn it to the right counter. You have to turn it you have to turn it clockwise so that the logo is up and down facing that way. It does actually alleviate a little bit of the confusion because one does one and one does the other. We've got the CPU installed. Boom. Now, one cool thing to remember, I don't know if it's a cool thing, but it's something to remember. When you are working and building a computer, you want to do the most you can before you actually install the motherboard into the chassis, because once you put stuff into the chassis, your space is very limited. So we're going to put as much on this thing as possible before we even install it. And then I won't install it because I have to install the fans, I have to install the power supply, I have to install everything else. So now that we've got the CPU installed, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the M.2. He doesn't want a hard drive because he's not doing a whole lot with him, but I am going to put the drive bays in the box with it in case he needs me to put him back in later. So what we're actually using is a Crucial P1 500 gigabyte M.2, which is just going to go right here, very sleek and smooth. One thing also to remember when you're building a computer, you don't want to throw anything. You don't want to throw the boxes out, because if something doesn't work, you have to send it back to the company. More often than not, they're going to want to see it in the box because they're not going to have any proof that it wasn't damaged in transit or anything like that. Also, the Verge standoffs. Every motherboard these days, at least, should come with M.2 standoffs. And if you don't have the standoff installed, you're going to be, the M.2 is going to be touching the motherboard, which is bad. And also it's going to be wrenching against the socket, which is also bad. It's not really a big deal with this one. I've got tons of these things. Here we go. I think actually I just put it up here. I've got my standoff installed up here, and I usually put them up here first anyway because that's where the motherboard goes first for its information. No.
Maybe you should have put on your magnet.
When you're installing an M.2, please make sure that the screw doesn't get lost in the chipset. Into the socket very easily. If you have magnetic screwdrivers, that is really, really the way to go. I do not, but one thing I learned in science class is you can magnetize just about anything. And I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use... And we have magnetism. Unlike what the Verge is going to tell you, don't screw with confidence. Be very gentle once you get it tightly, because you can ruin the whole thing. Screwing with confidence, if you're screwing with confidence, you're screwing gently, because you're confident that you know what the frick you're doing.
Yeah, you are.
So now we've got the CPU installed, we've got the M.2 installed. Now we can put in the RAM. Now, 9 times out of 10, RAM goes in a very certain way. Some motherboards, and this doesn't happen anymore unless you're using like a Chinese motherboard you got off Wish.com. RAM these days goes in a certain way. If you're running dual channel, you want to put it in this slot first, then that slot, and if you're running quad channel, which means all 4 DIMM slots are filled, then it doesn't matter. But if you're only running one RAM stick, you want to stick it right in here. Just as a little thing to remember.
Why the second and fourth and not the first and third?
You know what? I can't tell you that. Like, I don't know. It's just the standard. Most motherboards, well, all motherboards with the instructions will tell you which slots to put them in. But this is basically the standard. And that was one thing I laughed about right away when I was watching the Verge video. It's really simple to put RAM in. Just push it till it clicks. I'm actually excited about this cooler that we got. Up here, I've used up here stuff before. I have up here fans installed on Blandolf. They're inexpensive for an off-brand. They're inexpensive and they're quiet. That's one thing I really like about them, and I'll probably end up using them in another build at some point. So what we've got here is an up here tower air cooler that just looks really cool, and it's RGB, and it will be seriously fun to install if I can find the right brackets for it. Oh, that's clever! I was a little bit scared for a second because I thought, like, this is just AMD, even though it said Universal. This is really, really clever. It catches on the thing. So all I have to do is install this with the screws. First we apply this, and then we stick the little mounting thingies in there. And then we put the little black things on top of it to keep it from moving. This is a really nifty system. And it even has these, I thought these were like cheap little plastic rip-offs. Can you get in there? It's got these little notches that I thought were just plastic rip-offs from the molding sheet. But these actually have a purpose. There's also the same notches in the bracket. So it's got 3 little notches here. And we're just gonna put it in the second one. I am really impressed with this. This is very impressive. That's awesome. Next we're going to put on the thermal paste onto the CPU. Thermal paste is a sort of a ceramic sort of hybrid paste that increases conductivity between the CPU and the air cooler or the water cooler that you've got. And unless you are using an AMD Threadripper, you only need to put a very small amount, not stuff in the shape of a fucking house. So really, you just need the size of a small pea. That's all you need. It's kind of like when I was working on the GPU repair for Blandolf. You really just need a very, very small amount. When you have a brand new cooler or an AIO, make sure to rip this off. And if you have an AIO, once you take this off, generally, or like there's usually a little plastic sheet or something. Generally, there's thermal paste on it, and if it's on there, you can either use that or you can use different stuff, but don't use different stuff and the stuff that's on the AIO, because you'll just all over the place, and that's bad.
Wasn't so bad last night.
And another thing I'm liking about this is it's cyclic, so you can put it like this, or you can put it like that. So we'll be doing it like that. There we go. Awesome. Whew, that was a little bit harrowing. We'll stick these little dealies in there. Keep it from going anywhere. This is really, really an impressive setup. I am so... I don't know if I can say that enough about this. Up here, you guys got it going on. I think the only thing that would possibly kill this is the thermals, but I'm not worried about that either because the fans that I have installed on Blandolf do the job and they do it quietly. Oh, that is nice. Get this, get in here. So not only does this have 4-pin connectors for all the fans, but it's got the 3 pins for the RGB. This is quite possibly the coolest hub I've ever seen. This beats out Corsair. This certainly beats out NZXT. See, check that out. It's got all the 4 pins and the 3-pin RGB. And then this just goes, this can go to the CPU, to the CPU fan port, and this goes to the RGB header. I'm really, really liking this. I should have pulled all this stuff out beforehand because this is really, really nice. I really, really want to use more of these. So yeah, I think I'm going to continue using this in future builds because that is really impressive. This, by the way, is about the size of a Cooler Master or a Corsair air cooler, and I got this for $38, and it's the most impressive mount I've seen. And it comes with this. This is so fucking cool. Because now what I can do is I can hide it in the back of the motherboard plate, and then run this down behind the motherboard plate and under the power supply shroud, and we'll be good to go. No, I want to do it like that because I want to be able to see. Here's the thing. What I'm going to do is I'll wait to install this, and it's just going to be a bitch to put in, but whatever. Nope, it's not. This is so cool. So this is in, and what I'll do is I'll just run it through this lip right here, and oh, this is just going to look so cool. Oh, you know what? I'm glad I waited on this one. We've got the air cooler installed, and we know how we're going to run the cables. We know how we're going to run all the RGB off the motherboard. We're going to run it all the way up. So at this point, really all you need to worry about is where the cables are going. So I'm just going to have to figure out which way I want to do it. I'll probably do it this way because the VRM for the motherboard is here. On the other hand, that would make it a nice way to hide the cables. So now that we've got the cooler, the CPU, and the M.2 installed, it's time for the GPU. And for this one, last year I was actually going to just use a dinky little 1050 GTX, but we wanted something a little bit beefier. So it's a 1060 superclock. The right way to do it, yes, there are 2 PCIe slots used for bigger components, but if you're plugging a GPU in, start with the top one. And it's not because it's easier, it's because this is where the motherboard gets its information from first. So, into the socket. And it's very simple, you hear it snap, and there you go, Bob's your uncle. Unlike the 1050, the 1066 gig, which is what this is, needs power. So we're gonna have to run power from the power supply on that one. And after that, you're good to go. So now we just need to get the motherboard standoffs. Standoffs are easy. You really just need to pay in mind to the holes on the motherboard. Make sure you're not drilling them out like somebody did. And so yeah, since I painted the case, it is just a little bit more difficult than normally because there's paint in the holes, so I'm just gonna have to strong arm it a little bit. Otherwise, don't screw with confidence because you can strip out the screws. For those very rare few of you who do take the chassis apart like you should to paint it. Yeah, put the standoffs back in before you install the motherboard. Or before you put the motherboard plate back in the chassis. Because then once you get up here, you're not having to fight the corner to get it in. Oh, no, we're good. I was afraid that the air cooler would get in the way of the fans, and it's not. But I do have to install the fans first. With the first two fans, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this one down this way. I'm going to run this one down the same way, so I'll just slip it underneath here.
I'm remembering the video where we go, montage.
Gonna need a montage! Montage!
Yep, that's how it was in the
Can I get it in? Now, when you're putting the fans in, if they have the vibration pads, you can screw it a little bit tighter, but you don't want to strip the screws, you don't want to strip the metal, so again, screwing with confidence is a bad idea. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to use this Gorilla Tape, this double stick tape, which I know I'm going to run out of this pretty soon. I'm going to use this to run the cable along the shell of the fan. Just cut a thin strip, and that way I can run them both. I'll zip tie both of them, and I'll run it down like that. Just like that. It's a little thing, but it's definitely a thing. The stuff, it's not all that inexpensive, but it's not really that bad either. And what it does is really helps get rid of some of the clutter. I don't like to use zip strips if I don't have to, because it's a small thing and it's easy to get rid of if you use your noggin. I'm one of those people that I will cable manage as I go because I'm relatively confident in this small stuff like the fans and things like that. I will cable manage as I go because it's just one of those things that if I worry about it later, I'm going to get really frustrated because then I have to take stuff apart to worry about the runs, and I pretty much know what I'm doing with this particular build. I knew this right off the bat what I was going to do with it. I'm so glad I discovered that. Like, it's just one of those things, like, it makes it so clean. Like, with the cables, what I'm going to do is I'm gonna run it down like that, and then into here and up. And it looks so much better. With Blandolf too, what I did is, since it's a double bay chassis, I had the fans, because here's the main case, and then you have the power supply, everything over here. So what I did was I routed the cables underneath the Blandolf's power switches and stuff, the little PCB that mounts to the chassis. I routed the cables underneath it. Ratted. I'm Australian. When you're mounting fans using these tiny little screws, you don't really need to go in all the way right away. Just get them in there so that it's level, and then you can screw with confidence. I have to be careful screwing stuff to the chassis though, because the paint is so delicate. Even when I ship it to the client, I am going to have to wrap this in plastic wrap so none of the paint comes off. Because it was airbrush and not spray paint. But I also didn't want to lacquer on top of it because the paint is so unique. When you get this into the right room, you get it in a nice sort of dimly lit area so that you're staring at the screen. All you're going to see on this thing is the inside of the computer. Like, there will be no definition to the case at all because the paint will suck up all the light, and I love that. Expensive, but totally worth it. It's gonna look really cool. Mm-hmm. So yeah, got all the fans now. I'm just gonna do some cable management, and then what we'll do is we'll install the motherboard and everything, get the hub all hooked up. Moving on.